Can I just say this? I miss Mark. I miss Mark. I think this union does. I think the whole movement does. And I wish him a speedy return. I think Mark will prove to be and is already one of the finest trade union leaders this movement has ever discovered. Ever. But why is someone with such acute political judgment so crap at judging football? But he's an eternal optimist. I texted him a few weeks back. Cardiff were at the bottom of the Premiership. They were 2-0 down. And I said, well, you enjoyed the Championship. And he texted me back saying, well, I concede we won't be playing in Europe next year. I missed last year's conference because I had a heart attack. I was marching into Trafalgar Square to speak, and I was marching behind the PCS banner. I don't blame you for this. I did I did about a dozen meetings in 3 days following that, and then I was supposed to be, well, I was speaking on a DPAC conference and supposed to be taking Tony Benn down to Brighton for a speak at an LRC meeting down here, and had to be taken to hospital. And thanks to the NHS, I'm here as a result of the public services that's rendered and under democratic control. And what's interesting is that when you have these things, the work that they put in is absolutely intensive, and they do an assessment of the sort of drugs that you then have to have and the lifestyle changes you have to make. Well, to be frank, in terms of lifestyle, I rarely drink, I don't smoke, I exercise, I do quite a bit of walking, things like that. So the only factor they could find was that element of stress. And they said, well, what do you do for a living? I said, look, my doctor was writing out a prescription for beta blockers, statins, and goodness what else. And I said, look, I chair also the PCS parliamentary group. He says, what does that entail? I said, well, it means meeting people like Francis Maud, Grayling, Gove, Pickles. He said, I'll double your prescription. There's also now a new technique called mindfulness. Have you heard of this? It's a sort of meditative, contemplative thing. They've started it out fairly across the country now. And the idea is that you meditate and it reduces your stress level. So I'm signing up for a course at the Commons. Then you practice initially. My problem is I close my eyes and I start going into that deep sleep. And I have a recurring dream of garrotting Danny Alexander, and it just doesn't work anymore. The PCS group, you've seen the report. See the summary of the report. I'm proud to represent this union in Parliament, absolutely proud to represent our members. But if you look at the report, it's a massive agenda. It's a huge workload we've got there. We've got 70 members of the group, and as the report says, it's like anything else, it falls to about a dozen to 20 of us who really do the heavy lifting on that. And I'm proud of the members that do that. But that wouldn't happen without the support of a number of people. And I just want to give thanks to a few people. First of all, the elected officers of this union and the executive support the parliamentary group intensely. They set our agenda. We enter into detailed discussions about strategy on each area, and they give us the support. And I'd like to thank them for that. I'd like to thank the team of officers within the union as well, the campaigners, the researchers, Nick McCarthy's team in particular, who give us all that support. And to be frank, they deserve a round of applause for the work that they've put in over the years. We also have our own parliamentary team, which is led by Simeon Andrews, who most of you will know, with Laurie, Richard and Michael. And they work incredibly hard. We would not be able to function without them, and they're acutely skilled in parliamentary lobbying. Simeon, you may know, some of you will know, he is formerly a Royal Shakespeare actor. And it is like Once More Into the Breach Once More every time we go in there. The last time, this is a terrible joke, and it's true, the last Shakespearean play I saw Simeon in was Midsummer Night's Dream. And the reviewer said Simeon had an impressive bottom. And it's true. He was brilliant. I want to thank Simeon personally for all the loyal support he's given us over the years. Let me just, the report deals with last year. I want to come on to the coming year. This coming year is going to be absolutely critical to all our members, all their families, and our whole community. It's the run-up to the election. I think what the Tories are doing in particular is a scorched earth policy now. This next 12 months will be a scorched earth policy driven by them to privatise, cut back and attack every public service they can, but also in particular the conditions and terms of service of our members. And they're doing so because they're unsure whether they'll get back in 2015. So they want to sell off and flog off and destroy as much as they can in the next 12 months. So we've got to discuss our strategy and how we handle it, how we deal with that. I think our strategy needs to have three elements to it. Let me just briefly take you through it, because it means us working intensely hard together in this coming period. First of all, we've got to delay and frustrate and oppose everything that we possibly can in Parliament and in the community. Secondly, we've got to expose and explain what's happening. And then thirdly, in the absence of others doing this, I think we in particular, and within the trade union more generally, we've got to offer an alternative. Let me just talk about the delaying and frustrating strategy. The Tories are running out of time now. They've got 12 months. They've got a limited amount of parliamentary time to force new legislation through and implement new policies. So therefore, what we'll be doing in the parliamentary group is we'll be using every parliamentary mechanism we possibly can to delay and frustrate them. And we'll be looking for alliances right the way across the piece. We will make alliances with anyone in Parliament that will support us. I blame you for this, and I will always eternally hold it against you, but you're forcing me to talk to Lib Dems, unionists, a whole range of people who, quite honestly, if anyone publishes the photographs, I will sue you for. But we'll work with them. I want our members now, and I want us all to go back from the conference to start gearing up every branch and every member for how we reinforce that campaign of delay and frustrating the Tories. At this point in time, in the run-up to a general election, I'm an MP. Let me tell you this, nothing is more important in this 12 months to an individual MP than their own political life expectancy. So this is when they're particularly vulnerable to the lobbying strategy that we need to pursue. So I want us to launch a targeted campaign where we're lobbying in every constituency we can about what's going on, exposing what they're doing and putting pressure on individual MPs. But of course, the key areas will be in those marginals. After Thursday, we don't know what the results will be, but if the polls are right, I think there'll be near panic among some of the mainstream parties about what's happening. And we've got to exploit that panic to our own advantage. So what I want to do in my normal moderate fashion, I would like you to launch a reign of political terror in every constituency. I want us to put as much pressure on individual MPs where their life expectancy could be affected by the votes of our members and their families. So we'll be asking you to reinforce our parliamentary strategy with a strategy of demanding individual MPs that they refuse to vote for some of the policies that the government will now lay before them in Parliament. And if they do, that we expose them in their own constituencies and eyeball and confront them in that way. The second thing I think is about exposing and explaining. I think we need to be clear on how we explain what's happening in two areas. One, first of all, we need to explain that we now have effectively a corporate kleptocracy. Can you remember in the 60s and 70s, they developed that concept of kleptocrats. It was largely in the developing world, where rulers came to power who were kleptomaniacs, and they used the state to rob and steal off their own people. Does this sound familiar? Because that's what we now have, a corporate kleptocracy, where privatisation is used to steal from us all. In 2008, £9 billion worth of contracts were issued to the private sector. By 2011, that went up to £20 billion. By next year, it will be £100 billion going to the private sector. And they'll argue, well, what matters is what's best. No, it isn't. This isn't competition. This cartel has been formed by Atos, we know them, Atos, Capita, Serco and G4S. Their profits, their shares in price have doubled in recent years. Capita's gone up 140% on the basis of their contracts they're getting from government. And they made, just between them, £1 billion worth of profits out of the last round of the sell-offs and privatisations. And what's interesting, in the recent reports, I think the calculation of their tax was something like 75 million. So not only they profiteer, but they tax avoid and tax evade at the same time as well. And don't they provide wonderful services? Atos administering the work capability assessment. It's criminal. The assessment of 1,300 people who were assessed ready for work but died before they took up the work. Read Callum's list, the number of people listed on Callum's list who've gone through the WCA and subsequently, tragically, committed suicide. Atos have had to withdraw because of the campaigning, and I pay tribute to DPAC and Black Triangle, the WOW campaign, all the disability campaigners who bombarded Atos officers, and now Atos have withdrawn from the WCA contract. But what the government is now doing is awarding the personal independence payment contracts. It's unbelievable, the scale of incompetence, and yet they get rewarded for it. And G4S, it makes you want to weep. G4S, apart from the Olympics, the best one with G4S, I think, is the tagging, isn't it? Tagging people who are already dead, basically. They were claiming for people who no longer existed. It was worse than the dead parrot story. But the other one I think I find offensive is Oakwood Prison. Oakwood Prison, where we've had riots, assaults on POA members, and the Magistrates Inspector in Prisons only 2 months ago said in Oakwood, a privatised prison run by G4S, it's easier to get drugs than it is a bar of soap. That's the performance of G4S. And Serco at Yarlswood. Did you see the report this weekend in The Observer? Serco administers Yarlswood Detention Centre. They refused to publish, and it only took a High Court action to force them to publish the report where detainees are sexually assaulted and one raped by the staff of Serco. And the best one for me is the privatisation of court interpreters. Can you remember that one? Privatised. And then the court interpreter, I think the first case was a group of Chinese people who were being prosecuted. And the interpreter turned up and the judge got mildly annoyed because the interpreter could only speak Portuguese. It was a bizarre form of privatisation that went pear-shaped. But it's feeding into the pay of directors. Now at the moment on these companies in the top 100 FTSE index now, the executive directors are earning 133 times the average wage of their employees. This is scandalous, ripping off, stealing and then profiteering at all our expense. I think we have to expose it. But also I think we need to explain there's another element to all this, isn't it? There's a new element which is not just corporate kleptocracy, there's a new feudalism that's being introduced. When you studied at school the feudal system, there were lords at the top, serfs and then slaves. What we now have is a form of corporate feudalism. At the top are oligarchs and rich corporations. Then in the middle is us, the new serfs basically, working often on zero-hour contracts, on low pay, that when people can't sustain a roof over their heads, and exploited in poor working conditions. At least under feudalism though, when they identified people not being paid for the work they did, at least they called it slavery. Now we just call it workfare, don't we? We force people into employment without paying them and we degrade them as a result. I think we have to expose the new feudalism that they're doing. I think the third element of our strategy is basically we've got to provide an alternative. People need hope. That's why people may well be voting for UKIP on Thursday. It's because the mainstream political parties have not given anyone hope at all. And UKIP's not, I don't see why the media are surprised at UKIP. It's not a new phenomenon. In every recession, an opportunist right-wing fascist has come forward to find a scapegoat. With Mosley in the 30s, it was the Jews. In the 1980s, there was right-wing Tories and the BNP and the National Front, and it was blacks and Asians, and they threw my lot, the Irish, in as well, just for good measure. This time round, it's a proto-fascist called Nigel Farage, Farage, and UKIP, basically. That's what this is all about, is finding a scapegoat and blame them to basically disguise the failings of our economic system. And I think it's for us now to take them on, and take them on seriously. When they do that, I'm not racist, but you just say, well, yes, you are a racist, actually. You know, this bit... And with Farage, it slipped last week, didn't it? When he started commenting about if Romanians moved in beside him. Well, I think people should be able to comment on their neighbours. And we had a family discussion and we've agreed if Farage moves in next to us, we're moving. We're selling up, mate. And you know, the story got lost in translation back in Bulgaria and Romania. A near panic and near riot set in, and it got lost in translation because large numbers of Romanians thought if they came here, they'd be forced to live next to the tosser. Let me just tell you what I think our alternative should be and what we should be campaigning on now, because it is about ensuring that we demonstrate to people the importance of our public services. We should be campaigning now very clearly, and it has all popular support in every opinion poll that you see it. In terms of public services, we should be saying very straightforwardly, we expect MPs to vote for the ending of all privatisations. Full stop. We want the end of the privatisation of the NHS. We want the end of the privatisation of the services that our people deliver. And we want now to bring back into public ownership and control all those essentials that we need. That includes rail. That includes water. It includes electricity. And yes, if it was up to me, straight for the Royal Mail as well, because we've been ripped off time and time again by shareholders. But I think that we need to explain, because others aren't, that we can give people hope. We should just say to people, we want a government where everybody can have a job. That full employment was one of the objectives of past governments. We want full employment, but a job with a living wage, protected by trade union rights. What's so remarkable about that? We thought it was a basic human right at one point. That's now being taken away from us. For those who can't work, who are unable to work, we want a living wage for them. I'm attracted to the citizens' income, so that everyone can avoid having to go to the food bank. Everyone can avoid being pilloried for being on benefits. And again, it is about making sure that we use our resources effectively and investing in, yes, productivity and investing in our infrastructure so that we can put people back to work. And we as a union, you know, we put forward a plan for 2 years ago for the Green New Deal, 1 million new jobs based upon alternative energy sources, in which we not only provided jobs, but we also tackled the issue of climate change. And also, as part of that campaign, we also said, if you are going to invest resources, stop investing resources on killing people. That means scrapping Trident. It means no more military adventures abroad and supporting dictators elsewhere. So let me just say finally this. This next 12 months are going to be hard, it's going to be tough, and I think we can rise to that challenge if we motivate our members. I think we've got to provide a message of hope. The mainstream political parties aren't doing that, so the responsibility now falls upon this movement and this union in particular. We've got to force upon them an agenda of hope. We've got to challenge them all the way. We've got to mobilise a political campaign to say to them very clearly, if you want our vote, you adopt our agenda. But if you vote to privatise any more of our jobs, to cut our wages, undermine our conditions, we are coming for you. We're coming for you in every constituency. No matter how safe an MP feels, they will not be safe from the blast of anger from PCS members mobilising their communities. That's the campaign that we want. I said it a couple of years ago when I was here. What do we need? We need 3 things. We need strength. Be strong about this now and be angry. We need determination that we can win this and we can force this through. But above all else, we need solidarity. Solidarity.